Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
The title of this interview is Awakening Your Spiritual Self with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. It's actually difficult to spell, but very easy to pronounce. It's a Ukrainian last name. She's a wonderful guest, another coach from the other coast. I'm in Brooklyn. She's out. I think she's in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, La Jolla.
La Jolla, very good. So welcome, Alisha. And let me tell the audience a little bit about Alisha. She's going to be talking about how she shares to become more conscious, compassionate, and frankly happy through simple techniques. Alisha is an NYU certified life coach, relationship coach, Reiki master, meditation teacher, yogi instructor, and writer for Mind Body Green and the Chopra Center, who is best known for her empathic nature, non-judgmental approach. Non-judgmental, I don't like that. No, I'm kidding, of course. That is great. And lighthearted humor. I love that. I love all of that. That's fantastic. It's typical for my guests to be of the same tribe. She was definitely of the same tribe. Her journey thus far has allowed her to experience an array of hardships and struggles. And that is something I really relate to. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into all this stuff without being verbose, which led her to find an indescribable inner happiness that she shares with all whom she meets. Alisha is a true activist advocating for both human beings and animals. Again, another big commonality. All the way from her childhood home in Oxford, Michigan to New York City, where I am. She also served as the first female president of the La Jolla Village Merchants Association in San Diego, California. Fiercely Optimistic headquarters. That's her company, Fiercely Optimistic, correct?
Yes.
Very good. The headquarters are located both in La Jolla, California and New York City, but all services are currently offered virtually. That means wherever you are in the world, you can be a client. And will you want to be a client? Well, let's find out in this interview. Welcome, Alisha.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
You're quite welcome. I love what you're about. I was a life coach. I did that for some years. Now I'm the head of a technological coaching company. We're striving to launch our app, which I claim is going to revolutionize self-help. We'll see if it's bombastic or not. But I love personal development. I love self-help. I love coaching. So great. I love spirituality. We're going to get into that. A lot of people think that spirituality is just like esoteric or is just something for religion. Not at all. We are, even if you don't realize that you're a spiritual creature, you have a spiritual essence and a spiritual side, even if you're completely oblivious to it. I have a protege, by the way. And when we study right now, we're studying Marcus Aurelius, and he talks about the soul a lot. For the purposes of that course, I define the soul or the spirit as our highest values. When we operate from our highest values, we're operating from our soul, from our spirit. What do you think about that, Alisha?
Absolutely. I think that there's an innate truth within us, and our authentic self is often covered up by societal norms or the perspective of our family, instead of just the spiritual being that we were born to be.
Even before I became a NLP practititioner, which I was interested in for a long time before I finally became certified and a coach, I realized that perhaps the greatest struggle that every person has, other than some physical hardships, is the struggle to be their true self. There's so much pressure from the world, to conform, right? To be assimilated, to toe the party line. And it's a lot of pressure. And depending on your own resilience or values or goals, or perhaps circumstances, it's one that I think that is a lot of people don't really become victorious in that struggle. They just acquiesce to get along. What do you think about that?
Unfortunately, I do feel though that it becomes easier as, you know, one gets older, because you realize the significance and how it feeds you and how it truly does allow you to be happy, because you're not dealing with a daily friction. You are finding acceptance of who you really are.
I have found there's quite a difference, quite a distinction between acceptance, which is really the desired state. That's the state. Now, perhaps the two greatest states, or two of the greatest, gratitude and acceptance. All right. But I found that there's quite a distinction between acceptance, which is a non-protestation. There's no protest, and resignation. I give up. I'm not going to strive for what's right or for the better thing or for my goal. I give up and I just get along and, you know, and try to not cry too much. I found there's quite a distinction, but acceptance is, you know, I happen to be talking, you know, I know we're going to talk about struggles and hardship. I'll mention some of mine. I happen to be a recovering addict, been so clean and sober over 21 years. And that was really hard, you know, to finally achieve sobriety, but it's all based on acceptance. The 12, you know, I was in AA and NA, and the steps were all about acceptance. And that's not just reserved for recovering addicts. Acceptance is where it's at, you know, accept my own foibles, deficiencies, character defects, as they use in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, whatever you want to say, you know, problems. Accepting them is the best way to approach them, if not solve them. You know, then you could define the problem and then think about solutions, choose a course of action, and go for it. But let's get into my first question.
Sure.
What does it mean to live a spiritual life?
The beauty about being human and also being a spiritual being is that there's no one definition. Everyone is on different levels, different pages, just different parts of their life where certain things need to be nurtured. So really, that's something that is a very personal question for an individual in this moment, right? And it can absolutely change tomorrow. So with that, I feel that as long as there is something that allows you to feel connected, and it doesn't even, you know, especially for those that don't necessarily feel connected to spirit or anything that is spiritual, I always take it back to this word of connectedness. What makes you feel connected? And that is just living a heart-centered life. And whatever those little baby steps are, that's what needs to be implemented daily.
How would you define the spirit?
It's everything. It's everywhere. It's you and I. It's this chair. It's the sun. Everything is spiritual. And when you start to advance to that level and understand that, I mean, we don't even see all of the colors in the world, right? We can't, with our normal hearing, hear our plants, but our plants sing to us. They sing when they're being watered. So everything is spiritual. It's just a matter of taking the time and shifting your perspective to actually see it.
Absolutely. You know, as a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, are you familiar with NLP?
I am.
Yes. And one of the things we learn, you know, and basically psychology is the science or the approach of you know, why we think what we think or don't think, and NLP is the psychology of how we think. And one of the things we learn is about preliminarily is about the brain. And the brain, you know, we think, for example, we see through our eyes. No, we see in our brain. The eye is just a portal of light into the brain, and we are always filtering out massive data. We do that by necessity, otherwise we would instantly go insane. with all the data that is around us, that is either in the visible spectrum or the all these other spectrums or frequencies. We are in a world so rich with information, and you could talk about it in terms of physics, or you could talk about it in terms of spirituality, and there's a lot of overlap between those two. People don't realize, oh, one's science and one's woo-woo. No. There's more enmeshment than you might that you may realize. But there's so much going on around us, and oftentimes we don't see the solutions, or we don't. All we see are the problems, and how we're not going to negativity when positivity, and solutions and richness and so many better things to think about are all around us. And I think that's a paraphrasing of what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parts that we have to retrain. The mind is a drunk monkey. It's like
Yep.
there, it's running around, right? That's where meditation comes in and stillness comes in. And then also having the strength to stop and look at a situation that maybe you do immediately see as a problem and say, why is this happening for me? Because it's not happening to me.
Right. I love what you said about quieting the mind. I strive to practice meditation. And when I say meditation, I mean the art of silencing the mind. And I am rarely successful. I rarely get to silence my mind. After hours and hours of meditation, if I get 30 seconds, I consider it a victory. It's so difficult. And I don't say that as a problem. I mean that it just needs more practice, and that it's so rewarding when I have that moment of silence without this chatter. Oh my God. And then what comes to that? What's useful from that? A lot. It helps to get more of a response time. Don't respond to things quickly. Have a pause. Know that I don't have to respond. I can just observe.
Yeah, no response is a response.
Right. Well, yes. Right. And it's a damn good one. And then talking about what you do, it's quiet, not making a judgment. That's a big part of what you're about, is not being non-judgmental, and that's where it's at. And Shakespeare, without being cliche, said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And you can make a judgment of things that are bad or good, but what I have a little saying that I'm pretty fond of, is that labels are very useful up until they're not.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Up until
they go into a box.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is that we have to stop putting ourselves in these boxes. A label, a majority of the time, is unhelpful.
Well, I agree with you, but not. We're not looking to agree. We're looking to have a great conversation, which we are already. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that labels are necessary, but then there comes a point when they're detrimental. You've got, and then if you go beyond, you're in the area of detriment. So, don't overly label, or don't let it, if you're making labels or judgments and there's suffering, there's negativity, or there's, conflict, then you're probably in the area where you shouldn't be, or perhaps could retreat back before you make that label, and just, maybe give someone that's a doubt, or delay making a judgment, maybe gather more information. Our feelings are signals, right? So what we feel are signals to ourselves about what's going on within us. So if we're having quote unquote negative feelings, that's an alert to us about what, that we can have a greater self-examination, a greater insight, and perhaps making a judgment is something to be avoided. So I don't like to think about things in a blanket way. Oh, don't make judgments. I think that's way too simplistic, but I absolutely agree that making judgments can be the one thing that if you stop doing it, you can have it can be a game changer, a life changer for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that there's a very vast difference between having an observation and being judgmental. An
Totally.
Observation is seeing it for what it is and allowing there to be acceptance. Judgment is when you see it for what it is, but you want to change it, right? That's where the judgment comes in. And in terms of putting, these labels on, I do feel like, especially with an individual who does start to see that they have a problem with alcohol or drugs or anything of that nature, emotional immaturity, you name it. Yeah, maybe in the beginning, a label is good to get you to take that first step. But what I don't like to see are people who are 10, 20, 30 years sober describing themselves as addicts. I don't feel that that's helpful. I think that, again, it's keeping you into this box.
I totally concur. I always, I don't like I said, I'm not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous anymore, but they were instrumental in my early years of recovery. But even at the outset, my early recovery, I never identified myself, and we do a lot of that in the rooms, as a mere addict or an alcoholic, which most of them do. I'm not an addict or alcoholic anymore. Those people drink or use drugs uncontrollably. That's the definition of that. I always qualify it as not just a recovering or sometimes recovered, as a grateful. I put that extra qualifier there because to remind me that that's the state that I always want to be in. State of gratitude. And state of gratitude, all these judgments that we're talking about, these labels, right? And their associated negative feelings, they dissipate, they're gone. I don't have them. I'm grateful, I'm recovering, I'm not trapped by any old behaviors or any desire to change my feelings. I accept it as they are. I think that's one of the reasons why we label or judge something is we want to change a feeling. Say like something is making us feel bad. If I label it or judge it, maybe I can feel some sense of superiority, or right. And now, say again.
Or control.
Control, right? Exactly, right. Which of course was beneath that fear, right? Right. So we put that out there, but I've long contended that the master skill of any recovering alcoholic or addict, and this is for any person too, because it's very common, is the ability to feel their feelings. What am I feeling? Have that insight. What am I feeling? Can you here's a label. I put a name on it? Because that's just an awareness. Inner awareness as well as outer awareness are critical things, and the greater we have them, the better off we are. The better off the less we'll judge outside, and not judge our insides, but just be aware of it.
Well, and I think that that's a really valuable lesson and approach, is understanding what your emotions are. And when I break down most individuals' childhood, that's not taught. That people don't even understand the difference between frustration and anger. There's a difference, right? But they say one or the other, and I'm like, no, you're mislabeling it. We have to learn to define that.
My girlfriend gets a little annoyed with me sometimes when, very often she'll say, oh, I feel good, I feel bad. I'm like, that's a feeling? No, it's not. Those are just adjectives. What's the feeling? When we get into more accuracy, then we get into a greater grasp of reality. When we exaggerate, when we use such vague terms as good and bad, we're not seeing things as clearly as can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
But that just goes down to the root of what's going on, right? So it gets you there faster, which isn't that the goal?
Absolutely. You want to waste time? Is that what you want to do? Waste time and effort and energy? Great stuff. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll come right back. We're Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. Don't forget, that's your married name, right?
That's my maiden name.
Wait, Hawrylyszyn is your maiden name?
No, Hawrylyszyn Frank is my maiden name.
Okay, very good. We'll come right back with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. Ever heard of accelerated learning techniques? What if you learned more deeply than ever before? What if you remembered what you learned far better than ever before? Visit www.perficio.io. That's perficio.io, where you can understand perhaps better than ever before.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a wonderful organic conversation with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. Great stuff. We're talking about spirituality, feelings, judgment, or the inverse of that, non-judgment. Great stuff. I'm really enjoying this conversation, Alisha. Thank you so much for being here. What's the easiest way to practice patience? We talked about some things that preface it. Now we're coming to patience, because a lot, we hear about these good things to do. Oh yeah, let me not be judgmental. Let me, achieve this goal. But then you run out of patience, and then you find yourself being judgmental or giving up on the goal or all these positive aspirations you may have had, because you just, as a life coach or as a coach, whatever, or as a person here on planet Earth, I have found that there is no failure up until you quit. That's when it's over. You have not failed until that point. I don't care how long the endeavor is. If you're still striving for it, you're in the game. But what precedes the quitting? Running out of patience, right? So this is a critically important thing, right? So what's the easiest way to practice patience?
Well, I feel that compassion is the answer. I mean, the easiest approach is being in tune with your own breath, right? And understanding if you are starting to feel something that's going to veer you away from being patient. But realistically, we have to understand the bigger picture, which is it doesn't matter what your situation is. In every moment, you're trying your best, right? And we have to give that credit to those around us as well. So just finding that compassion, finding that moment, and giving that grace as much as we can.
There are a lot of things in life where we can analyze and think about something analytically or scientifically, and come to a conclusion where there is consequences that may be unintended or even unknown or disregarded. But when I have found that when I exercise, I've often said, like I said, I recovered from addiction, and I saw in my early years that what I needed more to have and practice more than anything was compassion for myself as well as others. And, and it starts with the self, and compassion negates all those things I said that I described. Once I have compassion, then I don't want to treat you so tersely, so mercilessly. Oh, you didn't do that. You said you were gonna do that. No, okay, maybe forgive or have mercy or understanding or love or empathy. And then okay, there's no need to be so terse, so curt, so quip at people. Compassion changes that. I don't have to have that outcome, that result, and that's a great thing for everybody involved.
Right.
So
yeah,
go on.
We have to remember the 4 agreements, right? And I think that when we do point out someone's inability to finish a task or, not follow through in their word, what are we doing? We're probably making assumptions and likely taking it personal. Oh, so you don't love me, or you don't respect me, or you don't think that this is important. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter what that situation is, right? We've got to come back to ourselves. And it's the same thing when we do start to identify people and their, or rather those that we are impatient with, to stop and say, well, okay, we're projecting outward. What's really going on with ourselves?
You mentioned the 4 agreements. For those who don't know, that is a self-help book published in the 90s by Don Miguel Ruiz, if I'm not mistaken. And it just expounds 4 simple agreements. Do you recall what they are offhand?
Yes. Do your best. Never take anything personal.
Be impeccable with your word.
Impeccable with your word, and never make assumptions.
Fantastic. If you can embrace any one of those axioms, you will change your life. And no matter how enlightened you are now, we can always do a little bit better or be a little bit better.
Absolutely.
But those 4 simple truths or axioms or principles are life-changing. I love personal development. I created Proficio, which is a self-help, a virtual coaching program, and it's an app, because everything's on the app now, right? And I made it because I love personal development. I love self-help. Certainly, personal development it doesn't have to be codified. You want to improve yourself. That's personal development. That's the touchstone attitude. But I found that the desire is the beginning place. But what oftentimes we run out of patience and we quit, right? Or we get distracted, and then we're on to something else or get negative. But if we're going to really develop personally or improve the self-help, it's a never-ending process. One is never going to achieve perfection. The real deal we have to do is to accept ourselves, no matter what our state, no matter what our circumstances, no matter what our quote unquote failures are, and keep striving. We're not, life is quite frankly a tragic affair. I don't say that with negativity. I say that but being truthful. It's life. Suffering is all around and always will be. Death is inevitable for every single creature that's alive. And I say that without, what's that?
The death of the physical body. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't say anything else. I wasn't implying anything else, Alisha. Absolutely. But I don't say that with any negativity or impatience. That's the perfect design. We're designed to die, the body, because that's the perfection of it. If we can understand it, we will have less of a problem with it. But it's not something that, life is not easy. I can tell you that from experience. I'm 56 years old, and I've had a lot of struggle, disappointment, I have less disappointment and frustration, even though, I talk about my app Proficio. I've had 4 years of pre-development, 4 years of development. We formed this company, Auxilium LLC. This is a technological coaching company with my partner. 4 years of development, and we've had all these setbacks and disappointments. We're finally going to launch. And I mentioned I'm a recovered addict. I was homeless in Los Angeles when I went out there to pursue my acting career. I've had all these struggles. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And you know what? It's all wonderful. I'm not going to pretend that the struggle doesn't exist, the hardships, the tears. There's a great saying I heard in the rooms years ago. In life, a misery is optional, but pain is inevitable. And or you can switch that around if that makes better sense in your brain. In life, pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. But that doesn't make life bad. And just because there's suffering and sickness, that doesn't make life bad. We want to empathize with people and have compassion for people, help ourselves. But personal development is the tacit program and mission of every person to develop a greater understanding of the self, the spirit, and the world. That's my contention.
No, absolutely. We're here to learn. This is a learning planet. And the more that we can take self-responsibility and understand what the bigger gifts are, makes it a lot easier. And those, when you're in them, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to find the grace of it. But it's possible. And, that's not to override the emotions that are there. You can still absolutely cry and be angry and go through what that is. It's just that it's more about allowing yourself to sit with it and identify it and let it go, instead of burying it down and then moving forward with this chip on your shoulder. You know, and then when you look back at a moment of homelessness, and that time, I was very grateful for it. And now I look back at it, and it was like, it was probably the most free I'd ever been. You know, like,
we had Alisha, we had a slight connectivity issue. You said you were homeless as well?
I did. I lost everything at one point, and
Wow.
I didn't have a home for almost a year.
Where
And
were you?
I was in New York City.
I was in LA. Now I'm back in the home front, New York, but you were in New York. Now I know you went to NYU. So was that during, before, or after you went to NYU?
So I was actually enrolled in school when I was homeless. So I turned into, thank God I had such beautiful friends around me that saw my bigger picture of what I was trying to achieve, and, you know, were allowing me to couch surf. So I couch surfed for a year. And yeah, it was amazing, especially because, as you know, NYU is quite a prestigious school, and there's a lot of money there. And I was so dirt poor. I had nothing. And I was just like, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to get through this. And it worked out. It worked out in ways that I had no idea. And I'm so grateful for.
Like I mentioned, I'm studying Marcus Aurelius right now, and he talks about providence a lot. And I was of the mind that you know, it's a cliche that everything happens for a reason. I didn't really buy that. I said, okay, you know, I would counter with, oh yes, it's very often a stupid reason. But you know what? I have really softened on that, and I really come more and more to subscribe and embrace the idea that everything does happen for a reason. Why? So that the better thing can happen in the future. And you could argue, well, you know, that event was not necessarily necessary, or it could have went elsewhere. All right, but that's all speculation. Things happen as they happen. You can make all sorts of conjecture and analysis as you want, but the fact is things happen, and they happen. You can deny them, you can put a new shade on them, but they happen. And so life is always saying, what are you going to do next? That's the question that life is always begging. What are you going to do next? What are you doing now? Yes, but there's always the next moment. But when we have, you know, hardships, like we were both homeless, well, whatever, everybody has hardships or disappointments or frustrations. It's not over. You're still breathing. You still have feelings. You still have consciousness. That's the universal experience. That's the collective. And life is saying, what's going to happen next? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to stay homeless? Or are you going to get that degree and you're going to have a great coaching career or whatever, you know, and then learn some things, get some humility, you get some greater perspective along the way, you know? Absolutely.
Well, and I think that the universe whispers, right? And I know personally, before, you know, this whole, there was a lot more leading up to that of hardship and tragedy. And you know, I was listening to my ego at that point, because my ego was saying, you know, you need to do this and go there. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm capable of doing this. And all of that had to be literally ripped away from me, where I had nothing. And I was like, what step am I going to take? And I knew I had to take that step forward. So, you know, that's another reason why we do have to be so in tune with ourselves and be able to define the difference between our soul, our spirit, and our ego, because the ego will mislead you. And it, you know, when we get a little bit higher into the understanding of the ego is actually here to protect us, but it's not doing it in the way that we can often identify. So, you know, it's a very gray area to talk about, but it's a beautiful journey to explore and evolve into.
It's one of my favorite subjects, actually. And, you know, the ego is just our self-identity. That's who we think we are. But we have to understand when we have this self-identity, you know, it's all constructed. The entire thing is constructed. My name happened to be Tony Petrozza. What if my parents named me Henry? All of a sudden I'm Henry Petrozza. So am I Tony Petrozza? Now I'm Henry Petrozza. What if they had a different last name? So okay, now I'm Henry Hawrylyszyn. And that's just names. But it's a whole thing is constructed. So who is the true self? Well, I contend that the true self is something more than we can ever even realize or really grasp with certainty. Whatever I think I am, I'm more than that. I am more than what I think I am. Great.
Yeah, your spirit, your everything.
My friend, another friend of mine who's spiritual as well, it's commonly said that we are spiritual beings having human experience. And I concur with that. He'll say, no, we are, he'll say we're human beings having a spiritual experience. Like, well, you're just trying to be clever, Adam. Whichever it is, we're both. I'm human, I'm spirit. Here I am. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, which is more satisfying?
Right. I'll lean that direction where I get more satisfaction. Great stuff, Alisha. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll come right back with Alisha Hawrylyszyn. Great, Hawrylyszyn Frank. I can't forget the Frank part. Great stuff, Alisha.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. What is the key to wealth? It's not just making money. It's not wasting it. Avoiding debt and costly mistakes. To get the wealth mindset, visit www.proficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can start acting like a millionaire instead of just dreaming to be one.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a great conversation with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. We've talked about a number of things. Now I'm going to get into some of the darker, if you will, parts of our discussion. And we're going to talk about, well, let me just ask you, Alisha, where does one start if one suffers from anxiety, stress, or depression? And we talk about a lot of great stuff, but what if you can, what if you're like, oh my God, that's too far and that's too remote. I feel like crap. Okay. What about that?
Well, anxiety is fear of the future, right? To sum it up briefly and quickly. And depression is fear or regret or guilt of the past. So really, both of those things are to do with not being present. And that's not to say that there isn't healing work to be done, because oftentimes there is. It's about this really beautiful, transparent honesty that we have to be with ourselves. And I think, kind of going back and touching on this ego, right? If someone identifies as a happy person, a successful person, a loving individual, they're probably not making a lot of space for themselves to be sad or fucking angry, right? And it's like they need that. So put that this idea of the self aside, come into who you actually are, and give yourself that space to shed through and to write what it is that you're feeling about a situation, a past situation, a future situation. Be honest with yourself, and then have the courage to honestly let it go.
Letting go of things is a critical thing. Something I learned long ago is that when we say we let go of something, the truth is we don't let go of shit. Right? I was like, I'm letting go. What, can I open my hand and release it? No, you have to open the hand and release it. And when I coach people, sometimes I actually physically and literally have them do that to give them a physical demonstration. But letting go is a critical part of it. But getting a person to move out of this stuck state of depression, or a person to reduce or eliminate their anxiety because they fear something happening in the future that they dread, that I have found that, certainly I'm slightly biased as a coach, that there's nothing like the help of another in this situation, especially someone who's trained and has some expertise in it, like we coaches. But when I was a life coach, if someone came to me and had a diagnosis from a psychologist, I would not take them on as clients, because for legal reasons, there's the realm of therapists and there's the realm of coaches. I mean, and I often say that therapists help clients reconcile with the past, and coaches help clients pursue things in the future, goals, right? But between those two, where are we? The present. That's where all the magic happens, no matter what direction, no matter what modality, no matter what the person you're dealing with, no matter who you are, what you want to do. Now is the time. Now is where the magic happens. And I'll also contend that all the magic happens outside the comfort zone. Okay. Here's where I'm comfortable. But how do you feel? What's going on? Yeah, I'm comfortable in my misery. Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Yeah, so can you get into any more precision or any more granularity about dealing with anxiety or stress or depression?
Well, again, I think it needs to be identified, right? And when it is associated with whatever you think it's associated with, start to follow back those roots and understand what they're truly tied to. They are often tied to the 4 agreements, which, going back to that, and knowing what our triggers and traumas are. Sometimes we don't even understand what those are until we are, in our 30s or 40s or 50s, because we've been, for lack of a better phrase, survival mode, where we're just like trying to be a part of this community, society, and getting by, that we don't take the time to truly understand and look at what emotional health is. So it's really about that. And then I feel like it's a very blanketed statement, but it honestly kind of works 98% of the time, is when we get down to what that frustration is, or that anxiety, or the depression, those feelings are, what the truth of the matter is all you wanted was to be loved in that moment. And you didn't feel that you were, or you didn't feel seen or heard. And when you start to understand that, that level of forgiveness comes in. And from forgiveness is where you can actually let it go, and you start to relieve yourself of that weight.
I totally concur. And one of the great challenges is that desire to be loved might be 10 levels deep. And you go down a couple of levels and discover something. Oh, this is it. No, but think we're there. We got to go a little deeper, because putting a Band-Aid on a gash is not a good medicine. You got to go deeper, and you've got to get to not necessarily the root, but there's nothing like the root. The root, is systemic, brings the system. So absolutely. And I also, you mentioned the word, I mentioned the word stress. When I worked as a coach one-on-one, and in my own experience, certainly when we have pressures from life, that can be stressful. And finances, other necessities, relationship. But I don't challenge that at all. But what I also found, that one of the greatest stresses that we also have is when we start something but don't complete it. And when we walk around with all these incompletions, and when we call them stress, we call it stress. So I found the helping person, or myself, completing something. And I'm the first person to tell you I was a great starter, world's greatest starter, world's worst finisher. Right. So I seek to turn that around, change that. That's in the past for me. I always strive to finish anything I start. And because of it, I don't get stressed, at least in that area. The other area, perhaps other areas, but not that one. And that's a big one that most people don't realize.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. And I'd even say that for books, right? Because, you start reading a book and you're like, I'm not really into this. I always say, just finish it, because that is being put into a filing system in your brain that you don't need to be thinking about the book you didn't finish 4 years ago. But yeah, completing tasks and also making everything attainable. I too believe in a third party just for healing purposes and understanding the self. And even furthermore, I think that we're so smart. We're such smart human beings that even if you don't qualify what the maybe definition of victim mentality is, our brains can work a way into becoming a victim without it being very evident. And this is where the third party comes in and says, okay, I'm calling you out on this because you're making excuses, you're not taking responsibility. These are the things that I see and how we can get you to a place of self-responsibility that does actually allow for you to transition into a better part of your life. So it's all connected.
Absolutely. I mean, I concur 100%. As I mentioned several times, you know, in personal development, self-help, which they can be synonymous, but there's distinction as well. Anyway, I have started many personal development books and not finished. And that was one of the problems I realized that was inherent, excuse me, in self-help. And when I created Proficio, which is a virtual coaching program, I realized that was the first problem I had to solve, because we heard the sizzle of the steak and we ordered it, but we never even ate it, right? And so people buy books, don't even start it, or courses, don't even start it, never mind finish it. That's more common. So Proficio solves that problem. And how does it do it? Well, it's an automation, certainly, but what is it? It is what you said. It is a third party. That's the beauty of it. It's automation. People love that, because a lot of people fear the judgment. They fear that us coaches or us, because we're humans like they are, we're going to judge them. I think most people are not into self-help because they fear failure. That's why. I mean, if they thought they could have everything they would want, they would be so into self-help, but they fear failing. So that's why most people are not into. Even less people are into coaching, people like you and me, because they don't want to be judged. They feel they're going to be judged, or they feel they're going to be scrutinized, or they feel they're going to be pressured when they want to quit again. So, you know, you and I we're on missions to whatever degree to do what we do and help people and maybe change that mindset if we can, because if that mindset that's prevalent could change, we would have many more clients. I don't say that as a greedy business person. We're on missions, you and I, where we want to help people. We want to help ourselves, certainly, but you know, we also know that the best way to help ourselves is by helping others, and by helping others get what they want, then we get more of what we want. But the point I'm making is that when no man is an island, or no woman is an island, you know, they're asking for help and receiving it. That's a critical part, is actually the mark of a great person. That's how you know, by myself, I can do very good things, but it's only in cooperation that I do great things. And I say that with the utmost sincerity. There's no smoke blowing. I really believe that. And that could be cooperation in a great endeavor with a collective, or working with a coach, a third party. I cooperate with you, you cooperate with me, and we work together and moving in the direction that we want to go, maybe even achieve goals. That's where it's at.
Absolutely. And we are part of a collective. We're part of the community. And when we're doing the work for ourselves, we are healing our neighbors. We are healing our family generational trauma. It really, truly is a beautiful space. And, you know, when it does come to self-help books, I've said this from day one of starting my practice, that, you know, I do not recommend anyone using any kind of self-help book by themselves, because you get stuck in your head, right? And it's like, that's exactly what we want to avoid. We need you to voice what you think, because oftentimes what your thought is in your head, when it comes out of your mouth, you make the correlation and connection that it's not even real, or it's so far-fetched that it's like, I can't believe this is something that I'm even thinking. It doesn't truly make sense. So it's about having that beautiful support team. And that's another aspect of when I am coaching people, is that I never want someone to be just reliant on myself and my services, because I don't think that really does anyone very good. And I help them identify in their lives who it is that their support system is. Right. And then they can grow from there.
Totally concur. I mean, I said it at the outset when I first met you. I got the energies. We are from the same tribe. You and I are in the same tribe, dear woman. I wholeheartedly concur. I mean, I want to improve the world. I also know that the best way for me to do that is to improve myself, but I want to help people. And there is so much healing and help to go around as long as I can be compassionate and be as sincere and humble. The more sincere and humble I am, the better off everyone is. Great stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Alisha. Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
go on, please. I am sorry about that.
I was just going to say, acts of service and being of service to people, it is the quickest way for you to get out of your own way.
Totally. Let's take our final break to hear from our sponsor, and we'll come back with the last segment with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. Great stuff, Alisha. I'm sorry to say that. Well, almost sorry to say goodbye in shortly, but this has been a wonderful conversation. And the great thing about it, it's all being recorded for playback perpetually. Great stuff.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. What if you could get the results of being coached without a human coach? What if a computer could coach you? Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can get coached without scrutiny, judgment, or pressure.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. And unfortunately, we're in the final segment with Alisha Hawrylyszyn Frank. Great conversation, talking about all very fascinating, interesting, beneficial stuff, very valuable stuff for the listener, I think. We've touched a number of facets, but I'm going to ask my final question is, how can I instantly become happier today?
That's a tough question.
You're on the hot seat, woman.
I think that it actually goes back to what I said just before the break, which is be of service. Whether it's something simple like pay it forward, or having a conversation with an elderly person at the grocer, reaching out to people, donating your time. When we start to stop being so selfish and in our own ways and just really giving from a place of being heart-centered, your whole world changes. I honestly cannot imagine living my life without being able to serve people and to help people and to be a part of community in this form. I really can't. And I feel that in the toughest times of my life, every time I went to a place of giving, it just made me feel so much better.
Absolutely. I certainly, we're selfish, genetically, but then there's way beyond the instinct. Okay, that's the problem. That's the issue that you're talking about. But there's two sides. There's balance. We have to be selfish to a degree, and we have to be selfless to a degree. Not to be pretend to be saints or to pretend to be some altruistic model, but because in that balance is where it's at. That's where it's at.
Exactly.
I say that, listen, I'm the greatest proponent for individuality, but you also must be a team player in whatever context or whatever group or whatever collective it may be. There has to be both.
Right. We have to live a heart-centered life. And when we are in that space, we want to give and we want to allow ourselves to be a part of something of the greater good. And that exists, and we create that ourselves.
That is the perfect ending. We create that ourselves. Alisha, this has been a fantastic conversation with you. Do you have any final remarks for the audience?
No, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for having me, Tony.
You're quite welcome. I understand that you have a discount that you're offering.
Yes, I'm offering a discounted rate for my 6-session package, just so that people can start to come into their own inner happiness and see the beauty and the momentum that we can create in such a short period of time, really either weekly or bi-weekly sections in 6 to 12 weeks, and to witness how taking self-responsibility and starting to, quote unquote, do the work, really levels us up and allows us to be our authentic selves.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Really, this has been a really fantastic conversation. It's been really a joy for me to experience, and I'm so glad that it's going to be a podcast for anyone to check out. Great stuff. I really appreciate you being here, meeting you, a wonderful person, and thank you. Thanks again. And how do people get a hold of you? I'm not going to forget that.
Oh, fiercelyoptimistic.com.
Okay, great. And you will have a profile page. So I encourage you to go to fiercelyoptimistic.com, no hyphens, right? And that is Alisha's website. There's a place out in California and here in New York. Great stuff. Alisha, thanks again. And I want everyone to remember that we're all responsible for ourselves and we can all use a little help. And with that, thanks for joining the podcast. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Alisha.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.